I think I have a problem. These are all the running shoes I've accumulated over the last few years. And every time I review a shoe, or post about a shoe, or mention a shoe, I get the exact same question. Caroline, what's the best running shoe? Because let's be real, running shoes are expensive. Most runners aren't looking to build a collection of running shoes. Or are we? You don't want to waste money, you just want to know you're buying the right one. The problem is, that's actually the wrong question. Because just like there's no single best training plan, there's no single best running shoe. The best running shoe for a beginner isn't the best running shoe for a marathon runner. The best running shoe for someone running 3 days a week isn't the best running shoe for someone running 100 kilometers a week. And the shoe that works perfectly for me might be completely wrong for you. So instead of naming one best running shoe, I'm going to show you the best running shoe for every type of runner. Maybe you're training for your first 5K, maybe you're chasing a marathon PR, maybe you've been dealing with injuries and just want to run consistently again. Or maybe you're standing in a running store, staring at 50 different shoes, wondering how anyone is supposed to choose. If that's you, you're in the right place. The goal of this video isn't to tell you what shoe you should buy. It's to help you figure out which shoe is right for you. But before we get started, a quick disclaimer. I've worked with shoe brands in the past and I've spent 5 years sponsored by Hoka. I've also reviewed shoes for Roadrunner Sports, but no brand is paying me to make this video. And every opinion you're about to hear is completely my own. Alright, let's start with beginners. If you're new to running, you're probably already overwhelmed. Everyone online seems to have a different opinion. One person tells you to buy carbon shoes, another person says you need stability shoes, and suddenly buying a pair of running shoes feels way more complicated than it should. Here is my take. If you're new to running, your goal isn't finding the fastest shoe. Your goal is finding a shoe that helps you stay consistent. You want something that's comfortable. You want something that feels good. And honestly, you want something that makes you excited to go running. When I first started running, I was definitely drawn to the coolest looking shoes on the shelf. And while I don't necessarily recommend choosing a shoe based on looks, I do think there's value in finding something you're excited to put on. Because let's be real, it doesn't matter how amazing a shoe is if you're not actually getting out the door. When I look at the beginner athletes I've coached over the years, the runners who improve the most aren't the ones with the fanciest shoes. They're the runners who stay healthy and consistent. And that's why my pick for beginner runners are, drumroll, the Nike Vomero Plus and the Hoka Clifton 10. The reason I like both of these shoes is that they're incredibly comfortable. They have plenty of cushioning, they're forgiving on the body, and they don't feel intimidating to run in. The Vomero Plus is probably the softer and more cushioned of the two, so if your goal is simply to get out the door and enjoy your runs and make running feel as comfortable as possible, that's a great option. The Clifton 10 feels a little lighter and a little more versatile to me. So if you're someone who wants a comfortable shoe but also wants something that can grow with you as you become a more experienced runner, I'd lean towards the Clifton. And if you have wider feet, I would also look at the Hoka Bondi. It's incredibly cushioned, and for many runners, it just feels comfortable from the very first run. And I know what you're thinking. What about carbon-plated shoes? Don't worry, we'll get into those later, because I actually do use carbon-plated shoes, and I recommend them in certain situations. But if you're brand new to running, I don't think that's where your focus should be. And that's because the biggest gains don't come from the shoe, they come from building consistency. Because unfortunately, running isn't as simple as buying a fancy pair of running shoes and suddenly becoming a much better runner. I know I keep repeating this, but the runners who improve the most aren't the runners with the most expensive gear. They're the runners who keep showing up. Now, once you've built that consistency and you're running 3 or more times per week, that's where things start getting a little more interesting. Because now we're not just trying to build a running habit, we're trying to train smarter. One of the biggest mindset shifts I see when athletes start working with me is realizing that not every run should feel hard. And honestly, I had to learn this lesson myself. I'm ambitious. My goal is literally the Olympics. And for years, I thought the bigger the goal, the harder every run needed to be. But that's not how great training works. Most runners don't need more intensity. They need more purpose. And that's why I don't actually have one favorite daily trainer. I have favorite shoes for different purposes. So for my easy runs and recovery runs below 70% of max heart rate, I love the Nike Vomero Plus. It's soft, it's comfortable, and it encourages me to keep those runs easy. For my moderate runs, or the days where I want a little more pop, I love the Adidas Evo SL. I actually think the hype is real for this one. For long runs, I keep coming back to the Nova Blast, and one reason is that I find Asics shoes to generally fit a little roomier than some of the other brands. And while some runners choose to size down because of that, I actually don't, especially for those long runs. During longer runs, my feet tend to swell up and take up more room in the shoe, so having that little bit of extra space becomes really valuable after an hour, 2 hours, or even longer. I also love how comfortable the Nova Blast feels. It has enough cushioning to protect your legs during those longer efforts, without feeling overly soft or unstable. And it's one of those shoes that just feels right and lets you focus on the run. I also love the Hoka Skyflow. Compared to the Nova Blast, I find the Skyflow is less bouncy but more controlled. So if you're someone who wants a smooth, comfortable ride and doesn't care about having the lightest shoe on the market, then the Skyflow is a great option. Both the Nova Blast and the Skyflow are shoes I genuinely look forward to wearing. And honestly, I think that's something a lot of runners overlook. Because if you enjoy running in a shoe, you're probably going to look forward to your runs more. And when you look forward to your runs more, you're more likely to stay consistent. And consistency is still the thing that drives most of your improvement. Now, once you're running 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 days per week, the bigger challenge usually isn't finding the perfect shoe. It's knowing what type of run you should be doing. Should today be an easy run, a threshold workout, a VO2 max session, a fartlek? And that's actually one of the reasons I created my 20 structured workouts guide. One of the most common questions I get is, Karoline, what workout should I do? Especially if you're not training for a specific race or you've already done a lot of typical training plans. So I put together 20 of my favorite workouts and I explain exactly when to use them, how hard to run them, how much recovery to take, and how to scale them based on your experience level. So if you're ready to add more structure to your training, I'll link it right here and in the description below. So now, eventually many runners take the next step. They sign up for their first marathon, and that's where the shoe choice starts becoming even more important. Marathon training is different. Your long runs get longer, your overall mileage increases, and suddenly you're spending 2, 3, maybe even 4+ hours on your feet for the actual marathon. And that's where I start thinking about durability, comfort, and protection. So how are my legs going to feel, not just during the run, but also the next day? Because as your mileage increases, recovery becomes even more important. So the goal isn't just surviving today's run, it's being ready for tomorrow's run. And honestly, that's one of the reasons carbon-plated shoes completely changed my opinion. When I first heard about carbon-plated shoes, I honestly thought they sounded a little gimmicky. Funny enough, when I ran my first marathon, I raced in the Hoka Clifton 5. I didn't really have a time goal, I just wanted to be comfortable, and to be honest, I was worried that the carbon-plated shoes would destroy my legs. I think I just assumed that they would be uncomfortable, and I also assumed that they were only for elite runners. So I didn't think they were for me. But then I started experimenting with them, first during a few speed sessions and then at a 10K. And what surprised me wasn't necessarily the pace, it was how my legs felt afterwards. I noticed I was recovering better, I noticed my legs felt fresher, and that became even more noticeable as my mileage increased. So do carbon-plated shoes actually make you faster? For most runners, yes. Research consistently shows improvement in running economy. And in simple terms, that means you're using slightly less energy to run at the same pace. But for me, the recovery benefit has honestly been just as important, especially during marathon training. When you're stacking workout after workout and long run after long run, anything that helps your legs feel fresher can be incredibly valuable. Just remember that carbon-plated shoes aren't magic, they won't replace training, they won't replace consistency, and they won't turn someone who's undertrained into a marathon runner. They're a tool and there are definitely some downsides. The biggest one, in my opinion, is that they're super expensive. The AlphaFly is about $295, the Adios Pro and Metaspeed Sky are both around $250, and shoes like the Endorphin Elite and Cielo X1 are closer to $275. So you're generally looking at spending somewhere between $250 and $300 for a carbon-plated race shoe. And even worse, they're not going to last forever. So a lot of daily trainers will get you 300, 400, sometimes even 500 miles, but most carbon-plated shoes are more in the 150 to 250 mile range. And this is before runners start feeling like they've lost some of that balance and efficiency. And not everyone enjoys how they feel. Some runners absolutely love them, others hate them, which is why I encourage runners to try different options if they have the opportunity. So for me, the shoe I keep coming back to is the Nike Alpha Fly. It fits my foot really well, and I love how efficient it feels late in the race. It's a shoe I've had the most success with. And I've also had a great experience with the Adidas Adios Pro. But remember, what works for my foot may not work for yours. The Vaporfly, for example, feels a little too narrow for me, but plenty of runners absolutely love it. Now, not every runner training for a marathon is worried about racing faster. Some runners are simply trying to stay healthy and make it to the start line, and that brings me to the next category. This section is probably the most important one in the entire video because every week I hear from runners who tell me, Karoline, I keep getting injured. And honestly, I used to be that runner. If you followed my story for a while, you know that I've had 6 bone stress injuries. And for years, every time I got injured, I looked for a different shoe, a different brand, a different amount of cushioning, and different technology because I thought that the shoe was a problem, or at least a big part of the problem. And every time I was convinced I'd finally found the answer, but the injuries kept coming back. So what I've learned is that the shoe does matter, but they're rarely the biggest factor. Training load, intensity, recovery, sleep, nutrition matters. And most importantly, how all of those things work together are much more important. So what finally changed my running wasn't a shoe. It was learning how to train. It was learning how to manage volume. It was learning how to manage intensity. It was learning how to recover. It was having a system. Today, I'm running more mileage than ever. I'm doing double threshold workouts. I'm racing regularly, and I'm rotating through many of the same type of shoes I've talked about in this video. So when runners tell me they're injured, I rarely start by looking at their shoes. I start by looking at their training. Now, if we're trying to stack the odds in your favor, I still want comfort. I still want protection, and I still want a shoe that your body enjoys running in. So this is where I would lean towards the more cushioned shoes, like the Vomero, like the Bondi, like the Skyflow, and like the Nova Blast. And for harder workouts, I personally like carbon-plated shoes because I find my legs recover better afterwards. So for years, I've used the Nike Zoom Fly for many of those sessions. It's essentially Nike's training shoe version of the Vaporfly and the Alpha Fly. So if you're curious about carbon-plated shoes but aren't ready to spend nearly $300 on a race shoe, it's a great place to start. And in general, if you're curious about any of the shoes I've mentioned in this video, I will leave a link to all of them in the description below. But again, there isn't one injury-proof shoe. And if a shoe feels wrong on your foot, it probably is. And over the years, that's something I've become increasingly convinced of. The biggest breakthroughs rarely come from changing your shoes. They come from changing how you train. And this is one of the biggest reasons I became a coach, because most runners don't need another shoe recommendation. They need help understanding what's actually causing the problem. They need help managing training load, intensity, progression, and recovery. And I don't think I would be the runner that I am today without coaching. I have worked with coaches for the last 7 years, and many of the biggest breakthroughs in my own running came from having someone guide me through the process. Someone who could see the things I couldn't. Someone who could help me manage volume, intensity, and recovery. So if you're working hard but still not seeing the results you feel you should be seeing, don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, now let's talk about female runners. And if you're not a female runner, feel free to skip to the next chapter. And just to be clear, I'm not saying women need completely different running shoes than men, but I do think that there are some things that female runners should pay attention to. So one thing I've personally noticed, both in my own training and with many of the female athletes that I coach, is that shoes can feel different depending on where you're in your cycle. And there isn't much science on this as far as I'm aware of, but I wanted to share my experience. So there are times where I'm dealing with more stiffness and times where shoes that normally feel great suddenly don't feel as comfortable. So I rotate between the Nova Blast, the Nimbus 27, and the Cumulus. I find they're a little roomier than many of the other brands, which I personally appreciate, especially during longer runs. And if you're wondering what the difference are between the Nova Blast, the Nimbus, and the Cumulus, I actually made a short video breaking that down. So I will link that right here. And one of the things that you'll probably notice through this video is that I'm not spending a lot of time talking about stack heights, foam compounds, and all the technical specs. And that's intentional because when I ask runners about a shoe, I don't want the spec sheet. I want to know how it actually feels. Who is it for and whether they genuinely enjoy running in it. So if you enjoy this more practical, real-world approach to running shoes and training, make sure you're subscribed. Every week I share what I'm learning as both a coach and a runner. So the mistakes, the breakthroughs, and the things that actually move the needle, at least for me in my experience. And if you do subscribe, make sure you turn on notifications. That way YouTube is much more likely to show you future videos and you won't miss new uploads when they come out. Now let's talk about runners with wide feet. If you've ever put on a shoe and immediately felt squeezed, this section is for you. So one of the biggest mistakes runners make is trying to force their foot into a shoe. Just because a shoe is popular doesn't mean it's right for your foot. So if you have wide feet, the first thing I'd look for isn't a specific shoe. It's a shoe that's actually available in wide sizes. So if you're looking for maximum comfort and cushioning, I would start with the Hoka Bondi. It has volume, it's available in wide, and it's one of the shoes I see recommended most often by runners with wider feet. If you want something a little more versatile, I'd look at the New Balance 1080. I've also heard great things about that one for those who have wide feet. I personally like it as well. It's softer than previous versions and it's available in multiple widths. And it can also handle a wider variety of runs. The Brooks Ghost is another shoe that consistently gets recommended. It's comfortable, it's reliable, and Brooks does a great job offering different width options. And if you like Asics, the Nimbus is another great option. It's highly cushioned, it has a roomier fit than many performance-focused shoes, and it's one of my personal favorites for comfortable mileage. Because at the end of the day, comfort matters more than trends. A shoe that fits your foot is always going to be better than a popular shoe that doesn't. Now, let's talk about runners who need a little more stability. I don't automatically believe that everyone who overpronates needs a traditional stability shoe. But if you've historically done well in stability shoes, or you've been advised to use one by a physical therapist or a running specialist, these are the shoes I would start with. The Asics Kayano, the Brooks Glycerin GTS, and the New Balance 860. So all of these are comfortable. They're reliable, they've been trusted by runners for years, and if you've tried neutral shoes and always find yourself coming back to the stability shoes, there's probably a reason for that. Now, maybe you're watching this and thinking, Karoline, this is great, but I don't want 6 different shoes. I just want one shoe that can do almost everything. If that's you, this next category is for you. If I could only own one running shoe, it would probably be, drumroll, the Adidas Evo SL. And that's saying a lot because you've probably noticed throughout this video, I like having different shoes for different purposes. But the Evo SL is one of the few shoes I've found that can handle almost everything. Easy runs, long runs, workouts, and even some faster efforts. It's lightweight, it's versatile, and most importantly, it's fun to run in. If you prefer a little more cushioning, I would look at the Nova Blast, and if comfort is your #1 priority, I would probably lean towards the Skyflow, but maybe you're not looking for one shoe. Maybe you're looking for the fastest shoe. And if that's you, chasing a PR, this is where I'm looking at the carbon-plated shoes. The Nike Alphafly, the Adidas Adios Pro, the Asics Metaspeed Sky, and the Nike Vaporfly. So as mentioned before, I'd choose the Alphafly. It's the shoe I race in and the shoe I keep coming back to year after year. But remember, the fastest shoe for me may not be the fastest shoe for you. And that's the entire point of this video. There isn't one best running shoe. There's only the best running shoe for your goals, your training, and your feet. So if there's one thing I hope that you take away from this video, is that it's good to experiment. Try different shoes, try different brands, and try different approaches, because eventually you will find something that works for you. And once you find it, trust it. There will always be people online telling you that another shoe is better, another brand is better, another training method is better, and that's okay. The best runners I know aren't constantly chasing the next thing. They find what works and they stay consistent. And if you want help figuring out what actually works for you, I do work with a small number of runners one-on-one, so I will leave my coaching application link below. And if you want more shoe reviews like this, I've put together an entire playlist right here. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.